This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. So I'm not going to lie, when producer Tess Terrible pitched doing a show today on gratitude, I thought this might be a hard one. In a year of so much loss, it's not easy to talk about gratitude. But I'll start, and I hope it encourages you to call in to the show today. Personally, it's been a rough several months. But when I think about it, 2019 for me was not so great either. My mother passed away late last year, and then my beloved dog, he was with us for 14 years, died 1 month later. And then 2020 rolled in. It's relationships that have kept me going. I've said it before on the show, but I have a great team. My producers, Tess and Carmen, and our tech producer, Kat. We've been doing Where We Live remotely since March, and minus a few tech glitches, we continue broadcasting this way, so I can talk to each of you, which I am grateful. Now, my team communicates daily, often through the program Slack. I have never used more emojis to communicate in my life until now. I'm especially grateful for the conga parrot emoji. At home, I'm grateful my husband and I have coordinated our schedules, sharing remote school duties with our work responsibilities. And I'm grateful for my 2 kids, Cormac and Willow, who show me each day what resiliency looks like. Today, Where We Live, what are you grateful for? We want to hear from you. Here's the number, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. You can share a comment on our Facebook page or tweet us at Where We Live. Sue emailed and shared, I am so grateful for FaceTime, Zoom, and Instagram. They've kept my husband and I connected to friends and children who live far away. I've even made new friends through Zoom. And despite all its problems, we could not have survived this isolation without these digital meeting places. What about you? Again, we want to hear from you today. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Now, joining us now on Zoom is our first guest, Janice Kaplan, author of the Gratitude Diaries and host of the Gratitude Diaries podcast. Janice, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
So I talked about some of the things that I'm grateful for in my life, especially this year. And I wanted to hear what you're grateful for today, Janice.
Well, I absolutely love the way you did that, Lucy, because it's exactly what the definition of gratitude is. Gratitude doesn't mean that everything is going perfectly. And as you described, you didn't have a wonderful year last year, or you had a bunch of things that went wrong, and same with this year. And being grateful doesn't make the bad stuff go away. It doesn't change that. But it allows you to remember that you can have a different perspective. It allows you to reframe the events of the year and to find some things that are good and hopeful. And I try to do that every day now. And being able to do the Gratitude Diaries podcast has actually been a wonderful mindset these last few months, because I wrote the book a few years ago, and doing the podcast now brings me back into every day thinking about new perspectives, new reasons to be grateful, and to remind people how to think about the world in a slightly different way.
Mm. Now, we reached out to our listeners here in Connecticut, Janice, on social media to share their thoughts. So we even heard from some former guests like Jackie Hubbard, who is the executive artistic director of the Ivoryton Playhouse. This is what she shared.
This is Jackie Hubbard from the Ivoryton Playhouse in Ivoryton, Connecticut. I don't think we really have the vocabulary yet to describe this year. So many deaths and lives devastated. But in many ways, it has broken us open and made us feel everything more deeply, grief and joy and all of the things that make us human. And I'm so grateful to all of the people in my life who've brought me to tears with their generosity of spirit and their love of life this year in the face of such horror. I don't want to go back, but forward with this new sense of shared brokenness and healing together.
I thought that was so powerful, Janice, especially when Jackie said, this year has broken us open and made us feel everything more deeply.
It is very lovely. And it's important to understand that gratitude isn't just for the good times, and it isn't just for the bad times either. I think a lot of us say things like, oh, I'll be grateful when I have something to be grateful for. And if that's your attitude, honestly, you're never going to be grateful, because gratitude is something that you look for. Just as that beautiful audio you just played, in the midst of a very difficult year, you say, yeah, there's that side of it. And then what have I learned from this, and how can I grow? And Gratitude gives you that sense of control, of being able to move forward, of finding some hope, of finding some brightness. If everything is endlessly bleak and endlessly dark, then it's very hard to move forward. But with gratitude, you're able to say, oh yeah, there is that little sliver of brightness. And even in these very dark times, I'm able to find something hopeful. And that is a way of moving forward.
You're hearing Janice Kaplan, again, author of the Gratitude Diaries and host of the Gratitude Diaries podcast. We want to hear from you about what you're thankful for this year. 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. Linda's calling in from Summers. Hi, Linda.
Hi there. I'm very grateful for just being here. My husband passed in September of 2019. I'm grateful that he did not pass during the COVID so that we could have a decent funeral and a wake for him. But after he passed and COVID began, I just wake up every morning, open my blinds, and look at the beautiful sky, the earth, and thank God for another glorious day. And I found a friend to walk with here in Summers, and we walk anywhere between 2 and 4 miles a day. It's somebody who lives on the very next street that I haven't known about, and we've both been in Summers for more than 40 years. I have a lot to be thankful for. My children keep in touch with me. I've learned how to Zoom. I've learned a lot of things that I never even knew were available. And I am not a person that gets depressed. I am grateful, thankful, and I hope to share this with everyone. When you wake up in the morning, open your blinds, look up at the sky, and look at the glorious earth that we have here.
Linda, thank you so much for sharing that with us here on Where We Live. You can also share what you are thankful for this year at 888-720-9677 or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Janice, that's so beautiful, that statement that Linda made about losing her husband and still finding things to be grateful for, motivated to wake up each day and finding new friends.
Lucy, I love that. You have the best listeners. What a beautiful, beautiful statement that was. And, my point that gratitude is really in your perspective. I think that listener made that really clear, right? You could just imagine her or someone the opposite of her saying, this has been a terrible time. My husband died last year. It's been COVID. I've been all alone without him. And both of those perspectives are correct, right? Both of those things are true. And we sometimes think that the negative is more real than the positive. And I'm not sure why we believe that, but I often hear people say, oh, my friends just have on rose-colored glasses, but I see the truth. Well, the listener who just talked about her husband dying and last year so sadly, and all of the wonderful things she has been able to feel in this year, doesn't have on rose-colored glasses. She sees the world as it is, but she's looking for the positive and looking for the truth in beauty and in the lovely things she said. And I think that's a wonderful message and image for all of us.
We're hearing from Senator Gary Winfield here in Connecticut on Twitter. I'm grateful for perspective, recognizing that anything that didn't have to happen is an opportunity I didn't have to have. I'm grateful to wake up, feel my toes touch the ground, to have been brought to life storms, to just be. Kathy writes, the friends who dropped off food when we couldn't leave the house, fabulous coworkers at Connecticut Legal Rights who have kept doing the work, and the media outlets that have shared my story. Again, this has been a rough year, and something that you said earlier, Janice, about being grateful, having hope for what's coming next, and I think that's important to focus on.
We're coming up to Thanksgiving, of course, and I often think about the first Thanksgiving, and we always have this idealized view of that first joyous Thanksgiving with the Native Americans and the Pilgrims who had arrived. Well, the truth is it had been a terrible year for the Pilgrims. 102 of them had come across on the Mayflower. Half of them died. It was a terrible winter that they had lived through. Their crops didn't grow. The seeds they had brought from over from Europe weren't very good in the American soil. So it was not really a wonderful time. In fact, there were only 4 adult women who had even survived that year. And what did they do? Those were the people, not surprisingly, it was the women who actually made that first meal, that first big Thanksgiving. And the Pilgrims, despite all the terrible things that had happened, took the time to say, okay, but let's be thankful for the future. Let's be thankful for the hope. Let's be thankful for the things that might be. And I think that's a great image for us all to have this year, that gratitude isn't just to say, look at all the wonderful things that happened. Look at this amazing harvest we've had. It's to say, there must have been something good, and there will be something good to come.
Again, you can join us today. We want to hear from you about what you're thankful for in 2020. 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. I believe Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont is with us now on the phone. Hi, Governor.
Good morning, Lucy.
So we want to know what you're thankful for, Governor Lamont.
Well, Lucy, I love the Pilgrims, like your previous caller, but I'm really thankful in particular for the essential workers. In the middle of this pandemic, they showed up every day. They couldn't telecommute. They couldn't just stay at home. They were there, taking care of our grandparents in the nursing home. They were there going into the ICU. They were there as food service workers, making sure people got fed. They were there as daycare folks. So a special shout out to the essential workers. We need you more than ever, and we recognize that.
That's an important point, Governor. Before we let you go, I wanted to share, we reached out to our listeners on social media. Some emailed us, including Randy from North Branford. And this is what Randy wrote. I am thankful for Governor Lamont and his administration. They've been on top of COVID-19 from the beginning and have made correct decisions no matter how unpopular they were. Their leadership has probably saved countless lives. How do you feel when you hear that, Governor?
I say right back at you, Randy. We were very fortunate, for the people of Connecticut. More than any other state in the country, our folks wear the mask. And that's the most important thing you can do. We do that not just to keep ourselves safe, more importantly, to keep you safe, others safe. So, Randy, right back at you. I really appreciate your words.
Well, thank you, Governor, for calling in. We hope you have a nice Thanksgiving this week.
You too. Be safe, everybody. Take care.
Again, you can join us here on Where We Live as we focus on gratitude this hour. The number 888-720-9677. Deborah is actually calling in. She's in line waiting for a COVID test. Deborah, we hope you're okay. Tell us what you want to share.
Well, we are extraordinarily grateful because as a result of the pandemic, we've got our children and grandchildren living with us. So we have in our household a 4-year-old and twins who are 9 months old. And there is nothing like holding a little baby, I mean, just lying there with a baby on your chest is just guaranteed to give you joy.
What a blessing to have your grandchildren with you. Well, thank you, Deborah, for calling in to Where We Live. You can too, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Just to piggyback what Deborah shared with us, Janice, Melissa tweeted, this year I am thankful for the continued evidence of my children's resiliency and the many, many hours that we've been able to spend together that would have normally been spent apart. Janice, what do you think about that?
Absolutely. I think that finding those moments of joy and happiness within the pandemic, and there are so many people who did experience what your caller just said, that children and grandchildren have been in lockdown or quarantine or spending time with them. And, I think some people feel a little bit guilty about feeling grateful when they know that others are having a tough time, but it's okay. It's good to have that sense and it's good to share it. And I just wanted to comment also, Lucy, on that exchange with that very, very lovely exchange you had with the governor. And he talked about the essential workers, and then you had a caller expressing gratitude to the governor. And what's so important there is to remember to express the gratitude. Sometimes we feel gratitude or we think it. We know gratitude is going to make us happier, but people tend not to express gratitude. And reaching out to somebody that, as the person did, to say to the governor, you're doing a great job, it makes the person receiving it feel good, but it makes you feel good too. The expressing of gratitude is just so important. The governor mentioned essential workers. Well, if there is somebody who has helped you, if there's a doctor, if there's a healthcare worker, send them a note, shoot them an email, express your gratitude to them. There's actually lots of research that shows that writing a letter of gratitude can make you happier for weeks afterwards. So again, gratitude isn't just about thanking someone else. It's about adding to your own life and making yourself happier and better.
You're hearing Janice Kaplan, author of the Gratitude Diaries, here on Where We Live. She also hosts a podcast with the same name. You can join us 888-720-9677. I wanted to share an important point that Mariah tweeted to us. She writes, I suffer from major depressive disorder and have had a very difficult time that predates COVID. And I want to make the distinction that depression and gratitude are not mutually exclusive. One can be both depressed and recognize gratitude. Gratitude may be harder to come into focus when suffering, but it can still be there. Mariah started a weekly Shakespeare reading Zoom group, which brings her great joy, for example.
There's also she's absolutely right that gratitude and depression are not mutually exclusive, but there is also some great research showing that gratitude does relieve depression. When I was writing the Gratitude Diaries, I interviewed a psychiatrist at Mass General Hospital who's done extensive research into depression and very seriously suicidal patients. And he said at the time that gratitude interventions, including what I just described, the writing a letter of gratitude, often worked as well as any other treatments he was able to use. And that's pretty powerful. He has at his disposal all the pharmaceuticals one can possibly have for depression, but allowing people to focus on something good in their lives, to reorient themselves. That the letter of gratitude helps you think about somebody who has made a difference to you, somebody who says you are important and I do care about you. And that focus, that ability to remind yourself that you feel grateful and that others feel grateful to you can be an enormous help in fighting real depression or just the moody blues that many of us get.
Tell us more about what science tells us about gratitude, Janice, and how it affects both our mental and emotional health.
Sure. As I said, there is a lot of research into gratitude and health. And I guess we shouldn't be surprised anymore that there are mind-body connections. But when I was doing some of my research for the book, I was constantly surprised by just how powerful it is that gratitude relieves stress. It lowers blood pressure. It helps you sleep better. And as we just said, it has an effect on depression. I also found that gratitude seems to have an effect on your immune system. It lowers inflammation in the body. And when I was writing the Gratitude Diaries, I used to have migraine headaches. And I came up with a plan with a doctor who does integrative medicine on how I was going to use gratitude to fight migraine headaches next time I got one. Well, guess what? While I was writing the book, I never got another headache. And I asked the doctor about that, and he said, well, of course, you're spending every day thinking and writing about gratitude. Your inflammation is way down. All of us have different sensitivities, different things that are affected by stress, whether it's headaches or stomach aches, and taking that time to be grateful, to lower your inflammation, to lower your stress levels through gratitude can really have huge effects on your physical well-being.
Janice, you said something earlier that I wanted to circle back on about how expressing gratitude is hard. Why is that?
I think we sometimes worry that if we express gratitude, we sound soft and sappy. A lot of companies think that, I shouldn't say thank you to the people who work for me. I say thank you with a paycheck. It was that old 1950s attitude that I heard over and over again when I was doing my research. And the evidence is completely on the other side. When you're talking about a work environment, for example, we did a survey and we found that 80% of people said that they would work harder for a grateful boss. And 90% of people said that they thought a grateful boss was more likely to be successful because nobody succeeds on their own. When you express gratitude, people respond to it. But as I said, it's very hard because we somehow think it's putting us in a position of lesser power or we're undermining ourselves. Once you start doing it, though, you start to realize how wonderful it is. I talk in the book about the very first month when I was working on the Gratitude Diaries, and I decided to be more grateful to my husband and to stop criticizing and to just notice the good things that he does and to thank him for all of the good things that he does. And it had an unbelievable effect on our relationship. It changed things so dramatically. And he, of course, just naturally, as one does, started being more grateful to me. And, I had thought that being grateful to my husband for that first month of writing my book would be enough. But really, it ended up continuing for the whole year and all the years since. That expression of gratitude, whether to a loved one, to a spouse, to somebody you work for, can make all the difference for both of you.
I wanted to take another caller. Anthony's calling in from Bristol. Anthony, you're on the show.
Hi, good morning, guys. Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to say I'm grateful for the lessons that I've learned so far in 2020. I think that when things are hard, it's easier to learn because you face a lot of adversity. So I think we can take some great lessons forward. First of all, I think what the governor said was spot on about the essential workers. And I learned a big lesson about how important they are in our society. I also learned that this virus spread so quickly across the world. And the reason for that is because how interconnected we are. We really are very much reliant on each other. So maybe in 2021, maybe we'll move forward and be a little bit nicer to each other because of that. And last but not least, there were some really important racial lessons that I think I learned here in 2020. I never really understood some of the privilege that I have in my life until this year. So I think that we did a good job at least bringing that up. So those are some of the lessons I learned from a hard year. And I hope that 2021 is a little bit better because we will go forward with a little bit more knowledge. So I'm very, very grateful for those lessons. Thanks for taking my call, guys.
And thank you, Anthony, for sharing that here on Where We Live. I want to thank Janice Kaplan, who joined us today on the show again. She's the author of the Gratitude Diaries and the podcast, the Gratitude Diaries podcast. Janice, I listened to one from this week where you shared a little anecdote about how when you were growing up that you weren't really, didn't understand why we had to celebrate Thanksgiving. You shared that with your father. What do you feel about this week today?
Yeah, as I said in yesterday's podcast, I never understood Thanksgiving when I was a kid. I thought, what are we really celebrating? That old story has a lot of holes in it. And now I understand exactly what we're celebrating. We're celebrating that finding a way to be grateful, whatever the circumstances. We're finding a way to celebrate being together with whoever we're together with. And sometimes that's just ourselves. I know many people will be spending this week alone. But I think Thanksgiving is such an important time. We shouldn't need a holiday to express gratitude. We should remind ourselves every day to express gratitude. But if this is a time to stop and recenter and make ourselves think about the things, as your listeners have been so beautifully doing this morning, about the things that have made them grateful in the midst of difficult times, then the holiday has enormous value and has now become one of my favorites.
Janice Kaplan, thank you today and hope you have a nice Thanksgiving with your family.
Thank you so much.
This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. We want to hear what you're thankful for, especially in this year, 888-720-9677. As we head into break, we want to play for you what some former guests and some listeners shared with us about gratitude.
My name is Quinn Trong. I live in Hartford. And I'm most grateful for all the people who have been so supportive of me and my spouse during this difficult time. Over the past year, my spouse has been sick with chronic Lyme, and a lot of people have reached out to support us in various different ways. Some people have offered to go grocery shopping for us. Others have dropped off food and reached out and connected with us via phone or video chat. And we feel so supported while she's dealing with an illness, a long-term chronic illness.
My name is Sarah Koffold, and I'm from Storrs, Connecticut. We had a series of unfortunate events befall our family late this last spring. And I am most grateful for our friends and our home church family that took care of us during that time. They fed us, They shopped for us. I don't know if we would have survived without their kindness, generosity, and love.
Hello, I'm Belina Diabru from the Connecticut Shoreline. I am grateful for the many connections that have been made this year, despite the pandemic, and perhaps in spite of it as well. I am grateful for those who have reached out, stayed in touch, and for those, while behind masks, still share smiles, welcoming waves, and help us to stay a part of the community.
Hi, my name is Michelle Chula-Lipkin. I am thankful for so much this year. I am thankful to have had the opportunity to witness the resilience of my family, friends, neighbors, and colleagues. To watch them navigate a global pandemic with patience and grace has been a gift. Most of all, I am thankful for my dog, Augie, who came into our lives September 5th and has made everything better.
This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Today we focus on gratitude in a week where many people will celebrate Thanksgiving in new and different ways because of the pandemic. You can join us, 888-720-9677. We want to hear what you're thankful for this year. I want to go to the phones now. Burnett is calling in from St. Mary's Hospital. Burnett, are you there?
Oh, good morning. Yes, Burnett is here.
So tell me what you wanted to share.
Well, briefly, 2020, many of us use it now as a coined phrase for things less than positive, and we search for things to be grateful for. As the Chief Nursing Officer at St. Mary's Hospital, Trinity Health of New England, on a daily basis, we see many things to be celebrated and to be positive for, and the reinstallation of hope. We have frontline workers who come to work every day with their heart and their head, and they are hopeful, and they do amazing things. They are not the only frontline workers. We celebrate the frontline workers of our community who we get to interact with in different levels. As leaders in this organization, we spend more of our day with these frontline heroes than we sometimes do with our own personal families. So we are grateful for the caliber of colleagues that St. Mary's Hospital has in its organization, and for the frontline workers who we partner with to help take care of this community.
Well, thank you, Burnett, so much for calling into the show to share that. Tom is actually calling in from St. Francis. Tom Burke, who's president of St. Francis Hospital. Tom, what did you want to share?
Good morning. Good morning, Lucy. Thanks for having me. I think when we reflect on this question, what we're thankful for, I feel like I do this every year, but I think this year, that question certainly has much more meaning and resonates with me more than ever. And for me, I'm especially thankful for all the healthcare workers, not only at St. Francis and Trinity, but really those across the region and the state. And when I think back on what I have witnessed firsthand over the past year as the industry has dealt with the onslaught of the first wave, uncertainty about testing, uncertainty about PPE, we're unsure about the economy. We worry whether our kids are in school or out of school or a combination of both, and it's something that it can change on a daily or weekly basis. And the pressure that this puts on working families, and now to have to face a potential second wave of the pandemic, we know it's going to be difficult, but I think we're smarter, we're ready, and I truly believe there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So what I am most thankful for are the heroes who show up day after day after day without hesitation to care for our community, and that's the nurses, that's our physicians, that's our PAs, that's our nursing assistants, our housekeepers, our food and nutrition colleagues, our pharmacists, our lab techs, our radiology folks, security, our chaplains, our volunteers, our transporters, and many, many others that are too numerous to name. But it's them. It's their resiliency that is inspiring, and the care they provide, I am most thankful for.
Well, thank you, Tom Burke, for sharing that with us here on Where We Live. Here's the number, 888-720-9677. We reached out to listeners and former guests before today's show, and we heard from Tanisha Dugan from Theater Works Hartford. This is what she shared.
This is probably going to be a very unpopular opinion, but I'm actually thankful for the lockdown because it forced a recalibration of my life, making me see my family more, my children more, by sort of rebalancing where work fit in the overall balance of my life and recognizing that it's all my life, that the work that I love is my life, that my children that I adore is my life, that the people who support my life are my life. And I think trying to live with more intention and smallness, right? Like the life within the four walls of my house and the people inside of it are a world in and of itself, and that I should be spending more time paying attention to that. I'm grateful for this time of reflection and shifting.
Joining us now here on Where We Live on Zoom today, Adrian Gostick, co-author of Leading with Gratitude. Adrian, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Lucy. Appreciate it.
I think it's so refreshing to hear from so many listeners who are taking time to share with us what they are thankful for. When you think back to 2020, what are you grateful for, Adrian?
It's a great question. I think what Teresa just said there was so powerful because I think you're right. She's right. It's been a reset for many of us that perhaps we were a little frenzied. I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago for Forbes where I found about half of executives say they do not want to go back to their pre-pandemic frenzied lives after things hopefully get back to normal. And another scary fact was that 70% of executives who've been interviewed say they have some pretty serious mental health challenges going through this pandemic. So I think the thing that I am grateful for is that it has been a reset for me and for my family and for many that I work with to be able to say, this is what matters most. And it's probably not jumping on a plane and flying here, there, and everywhere. It's really those human connections.
When you were researching your book, what did you learn about how others are thinking about gratitude and reflecting on it, even before the pandemic?
Well, I think it's great. I've been able to sit down and listen this morning to so many powerful thoughts from your listeners. And one of the unfortunate parts of hitting tough times like we are is what's the first thing we do every morning? We open up our news feeds and we start doom scrolling, right? And we create in our minds this little super highway of negativity. So we begin with negative every day. And so really what our research showed was we began researching Leading with Gratitude was that there's so much positive that can come from sort of turning that around. We circulate dopamine in our brains when we are more grateful. And that's very powerful. We become, instead of glass half full people, we become people who are looking for positivity every day. And that's a very hopeful place to be as we start looking for that. So the first part of gratitude really is seeing the good things that are happening around us. The second part, of course, is expressing that.
So talk about how we make this a ritual in our lives, even beyond the week of Thanksgiving, Adrian.
And, we deal a lot with leaders. So in my practice, we do a lot of executive coaching. And what we talk about is creating rituals. And so in the workplace, we have a manager that we work with. He begins every day with 10 pennies in his right pocket. And every day his goal is to move those 10 pennies from his right to his left. And every time he moves one, he has to be grateful to somebody in a very specific way. And he works actually for the Avis Budget Group, the car renters. And we talk about a tough time to work in car renting right now. But he thinks his job is to go around, and he's a general manager, is to go around looking for positivity. So if he sees somebody doing something good, moves a penny from right to left. And by the end of the day, he wants to move all those pennies. Well, you can just imagine how excited his people are to see him coming because they know he starts with positivity. And we can do this in our homes too. We create rituals, whether it's, around the dinner table. How often do we, we're sitting around the dinner table with the kids and, hey, how was school today? Fine. What'd you do? Nothing. And so we talked to a marketing manager in New York recently. He told us he started this new tradition where he asks his kids 3 questions. First is, what was the best moment of your day? Second is, who are you grateful for who's not at the table and why? And third question is, who are you grateful for who's at the table who hasn't been thanked yet? And he says, first the kids hated it. Within a few weeks, this was their favorite part of the day. So we create these rituals in our lives to remind us to be grateful.
I want to take a call from a listener. Bill's calling in from New Haven. Bill, you're on the show.
Good morning. I walked into my bedroom the other day. The leaves were off the trees on one side and the sun was streaming in. There's a view out West Rock and a tree in full foliage out the other window. And I suddenly just thought, that's beautiful. And I just said, yay! I live alone, so there was no one to wonder if I'd hurt myself or going off my rocker. And I realized that just the embodiment of saying, yay! Made me feel better and helped clear the space in my head for some positive thoughts, so that all of the woes didn't clutter up all of my brain. Mm-hmm. And I've tried to do that since, and it's not a ritual I have to prepare for. It just reminds me it's okay to respond to the moment.
Well, Bill, thank you for that reminder. Christy's calling in. Christy, you're on the show.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. So I think the three for this year for me have been resilience, relationships, and new experiences. I think my relationships have gotten stronger because I've really been intentional with seeing people that I've been able to try to see in person or distance, and some new experiences. I've seen a bunch of new trails in Connecticut that I haven't seen, a lot of new spaces right around here, and also tried a bunch of new things like food blogs. I worked at the polls this year, which was a totally new experience for me. So I think 2020 has been kind of a big reset.
Well, thank you, Christy, for calling in and sharing that with us. We want to hear from you, too, 888-720-9677. Adrian, Lisa emailed us and wrote, I'm grateful for my good health and the good health of my family members, a roof over my head, plenty to eat, reliable friends, and I'd like to express my hopes. In 2021, I hope for healing nationally, internationally, and among friends and family who have been broken by differences. Normality, whatever that means now. And I think that's a good thought to think about as we look and we hope for the coming year and not dwelling on the past. Adrian.
Yeah, Lucy, you're exactly right. And what Bill just said a moment ago, it's those little tender mercies, right? We're looking for that give us hope. One of the best practice that, as we did a lot of research, was that, end of day, as you're laying in bed, kind of thinking about all the things that you've got to worry about the next day, is many people were telling us, those who have turned their lives to be more grateful, said that they begin or end their nights by just laying there thinking about the good things that could happen tomorrow, little things like I can have another healthy day. Maybe I'll hear from an old friend. Maybe the sun will be shining. You think about those little positives, and it really just sets you up to have a restful night and begin the next day in a good way. What you have to do, too, I heard a great little thing a couple of days ago as well, that one leader has begun doing on Friday afternoons what he calls a wine and wine party with his employees on Zoom. So they get their favorite beverage at 4 o'clock on Fridays, and alcoholic or non, and they just complain for an hour. And they those stupid customers and this, that, and the other. And at the end of the hour, though, they let it all go. So they begin their weekend with a very positive idea. And by Monday morning, they come in again charged. So you got to look for those little things that will keep you going, and just let it go when it's getting too much.
Adrian Gostick, again, is co-author of Leading with Gratitude. Thank you, Adrian. We're going to talk to your co-author right after the break. This is Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. As we head into break, here again are some former guests sharing their thoughts on gratitude.
This is Charlie Nardozzi from the Connecticut Garden Journal. Probably one of the greatest things I'm thankful for this year is the garden. Just like that famous quote, when the world wearies and society fails to satisfy, there's always the garden. And it's been so great to have a garden, to be out in the garden when all the craziness is happening in the world, to find a little bit of sanity, a little bit of beauty, a little bit of food right outside my doorstep.
My name is Julie. I live in Durham, and I'm grateful for the municipal land trusts and other organizations that make hiking trails available to the public. It's been a real pleasure this year to discover trails on lands that are less well known than the state parks and forests.
This is Alan Marcus, professor of education at the University of Connecticut. I am thankful for all of our amazing social studies teachers in Connecticut. Not only have they had to adapt to the pandemic and adjust their teaching styles and teaching methods, but they have also accepted the challenge of teaching about controversial issues and the election in a polarized society, which is no easy task.
Hello, this is Miguel Cardona, Commissioner of Education for the great state of Connecticut. I'm grateful for my life, my family, my job. I'm also grateful for the educators that we have defending public education in Connecticut the best they can. I'm grateful for the cafeteria aides, the custodians, teachers, the bus drivers, the mental health experts, the principals, superintendents. I'm grateful for the parents, and I'm grateful for my dedicated team at the State Department of Education.
This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Today we're focusing on gratitude, and we're so happy to hear from many of you throughout this hour. Danny's calling in from East Lyme. Danny, what did you want to share?
Oh, hi. Hi, Lucy. Thanks for taking my call. And I just wanted to say that I live with one lung, so I could be at high risk for COVID. And I have lived with one lung since I was born, and I want to. And in 2016, I contracted pneumonia and put me in the ICU. And I wanted to thank all the healthcare professionals at Yale New Haven Hospital, especially Dr. Siegel, who was able to basically revive me to where I am today. And then today with COVID-19, I wanted to thank the friends and family that have kept me safe, and I'm in a fortunate position to be in a relative quarantine since February, and I'm so blessed to have my son. He's 8 years old. He's virtual learning right now through Lily B. Haynes, those teachers are essential workers, and I love and respect them. And I want to thank my boy Steve, because he's also called me every single day to make sure I'm doing well, and I want to make sure I thank my mom and dad, and I could just go on, and my son's mother, and my girlfriend. All these people have, been up to date, and I want to thank you and NPR for just, keeping me up to date and on the cusp of everything that's been going on with COVID-19. Yes.
Danny, thank you so much. And we are glad that you're still with us. Thank you for calling with to the show. I wanted to bring in our other guest, Chester Elton, before we run out of time. Again, he's co-author of Leading with Gratitude. Chester, tell me what your response is as you listen to so many people taking time to share about gratitude in a year where we have lost so much.
Yeah, isn't it wonderful? I mean, that list of all the things he was grateful for when he could be miserable, right? And look at what's going wrong. To celebrate Thanksgiving, I was thinking, your show is a cornucopia of gratitude, from the governor to first line workers. And thank you for doing that. You know what I love about what your listeners and people that have tuned in have done, and I think it's a wonderful best practice, is rather than look at the pandemic and look at the year and say, why me? Why is this happening to me? They're asking, what am I supposed to learn? How can I take what I'm learning in this crisis and carry it forward? Hasn't it been interesting to listen to?
It has. When we think about, we talked a little earlier about how expressing when we are thankful or when we have gratitude, it can be a little awkward at times. And now that we may not see people in person like we want, what are some easy ways to share with people that you are thankful, Chester?
Yeah, it's funny, when Adrian and I were researching our book, Leading with Gratitude, we came across this all the time. Leaders would say, well, I don't want to do it. I'm going to come across as being bogus and insincere. So there are some subtle ways you can do it. I'm a big fan, and I know it's old school, of handwritten notes. Let's face it, Lucy, your mail is not that interesting these days, right? You're getting like bills and flyers and stuff. And to get that like colored envelope with a little thank you card, it really is refreshing. You take time to read it. It's an uninterrupted conversation. And it's an easy way for those of you out there that are saying, hey, that's just not me, to do it in a non-confrontational or emotional way, right? You just sit down, you write a few lines of gratitude and you pop it in the mail. I've got a friend that loves to send out random texts. We call them random acts of kindness. And Bob Bodine, a good friend of Adrian and mine down in Dallas, Texas. And just every now and again, I'll get a great text from Bob, and he says, hey, Chester, just thinking about you. Want you to know that, I value our friendship, that I love you, and that I'm cheering for you. Bob. And I'll tell you a cute story. I've introduced Bob to many of my friends. And a good friend of mine up in Massachusetts, Ted Priestley, one day I get this random text, and it says, hey, Chess, I'm just thinking about you, value our friendship. Want to let you know how much I love you, cheering for you, Ted. And my response was, are you with Bob Bodine right now? So it's a practice that can go viral. So a couple of tips there, random texts, which I think are always appreciated, and handwritten notes. Have you ever received a handwritten note, Lucy, that you kept, that you treasure?
Oh, yes, and I do send them out too.
Excellent.
I wanted to fit in a quick call before we run out of time. Doris is in Southbury. Doris, we just have a couple of minutes. What did you want to share quickly?
Okay, sure. Real quick. I just wanted to say that gratitude is basically, it's a choice that you make. We make so many choices during the day we don't even realize it, but I think gratitude is one of those choices that you make, that you decide to be. It's not magic, and once you make that choice to be grateful, you start losing sight of all the things that you thought were lacking. So it's kind of like a neat little circle. Once you make that choice to be grateful for what's in your life, everything seems to fall in place.
Well, thank you, Doris, for sharing that with us. I wanted to just read quickly from our other listeners. We won't have time to take your calls, but Susan says that she's truly grateful our democracy survived the election. She took a deep breath yesterday and feeling grateful. And James in New Haven shared with us that his family has a tradition, a game at dinner, that they take turns asking each other about what they're grateful for. And I think that's a great story to share with us as well. I want to thank Chester Elton again, co-author of Leading with Gratitude and co-founder of The Culture Works with Adrian Gostick, who we just spoke with. Chester, thank you so much. We hope you have a lovely Thanksgiving.
And you too. Leading with gratitude is a wonderful way to lead. I'll tell you what, it's also a better way to live. I love that last caller. One last parting note. My father always said, you know what, Chester, happiness is a choice. Choose to be happy. So I hope we all choose to be grateful and to be happy in this wonderful Thanksgiving season. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you so much, Chester. Today's show, again, produced by Tess Terrible, who I'm thankful that she took a chance moving to Connecticut to be on our team. We are thankful for her. On the phones today, Carmen Baskoff, who's been with this show for 4 years and continues to do great work. Thank you, Carmen. And our tech producer, Kat Pastor. Without her, you would not hear us each and every day. Thank you, Kat. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. As always, we're grateful to you for listening.